from without inwards, and as you can see in this diagram, there are coats of eyeball. The outermost coat is called a fibrous coat and consists of two parts. The middle one is the vascular coat and the innermost is the nervous coat. Now the parts of the fibrous coat, which is the outermost coat, is the posterior opaque part, which is sclera, and the anterior transparent part, cornea. The nerve supply and blood supply of cornea. Nerve supply is given by the ophthalmic branches of the trigeminal nerve, and the cornea is devoid of vascular supply. Then the parts of vascular coat are from behind forward are the choroid and the ciliary body and iris. Then comes the nervous coat, which is called the retina. It consists of an outer pigmented layer and inner nervous layer. The posterior 3/4 of retina is the receptor organ, and its interior edge it forms a wavy edge which is called ora serrata, and it is a place where nervous tissue ends. Anterior part of the retina, it does not have any nervous tissue, and it consists of only pigment cells with a deeper layer of cuboidal epithelium. Now there are some important structures at the posterior part of retina, which are called macula lutea, fovea centralis, and optic disc and blind spot. These are different terminologies used to describe those structures. What is macula lutea? I'll tell you or explain to you in the next slide. Now I was talking about the nervous coat or retina, and in the last slide I think I told you that the anterior part of the retina, in which there is no nervous tissue, it contains only pigment cells and cuboidal epithelium. It's not cuboidal epithelium, it's basically columnar epithelium. Now coming back to the important structures on the posterior part of retina, the first of all there is a structure which is called macula lutea. Macula lutea is basically present at the posterior part of the retina, and there is a depression in this structure which is called fovea centralis. So at this yellow colored layer, you can see posteriorly there is a depression which is called fovea centralis, and this is present on the structure which is called macula lutea. Macula lutea is a structure where visual acuity is maximum because of the highest content of the maximum number of photoreceptors present here. Then comes the optic disc. Optic disc is basically the place at the posterior part of the retina from where optic nerve leaves the eyeball, and it is a place where there are no photoreceptors present, right? So at this area there is no vision or no perception of vision, and that is why it is called blind spot. If you see in ophthalmoscopic examination, this blind spot, it appears as a pale yellow colored disc, whereas the rest of the retina appears reddish. Now after the structure of the eyeball and the coats of the eyeball, we'll come to the contents of eyeball. Contents of eyeball include three important structures: aqueous humor, vitreous body, and the lens. In this diagram you can see the aqueous humor is basically a clear fluid which is present in the anterior and the posterior chambers of the eye, and anterior and posterior chambers of the eye are basically formed in this area between the cornea and the lens of the eyeball, and iris divides this area between the cornea and the lens of the eyeball into anterior chamber and posterior chamber. Aqueous humor जो है, it is basically produced in the posterior chamber, and it circulates and comes into the anterior chamber, and then it is absorbed. Then second is this blue colored structure, which is a transparent gel-like structure. It is present behind the lens. It is called vitreous body, and lens is, as you can see in this diagram, is a biconvex transparent structure which is enclosed in an elastic capsule. Now we will, in the next slides, we will describe these three contents one by one briefly. Now what is aqueous humor? Aqueous humor is basically, as I've told you previously, that this is a clear fluid which is present in the posterior chambers of eye. How is it produced? It is secreted by the epithelial cells of the ciliary processes. Right, ciliary processes, as you know, this is a part of the ciliary body, which is again in turn a part of the vascular coat of the eyeball. right? Ciliary body consists of ciliary processes, which are ridges or fold-like structures, and uh, another structure in the ciliary body is ciliary muscle. So the epithelial cells of the ciliary processes, these secrete aqueous humor, which after its secretion, it comes from the posterior chambers and it flows from there, from the posterior chamber to the anterior chamber. And after that, its circulation, it is drained away through the spaces at the angles between the iris and the cornea, where there is a venous sinus for its drainage called the canal of Schlemm. Now, clinically related diseases with the obstruction of the drainage of aqueous humor are glaucoma. The important presentation which is related with the drainage obstruction of aqueous humor is called glaucoma. That if obstruction to the drainage of aqueous humor occurs, that is when it is not absorbed at the iridocorneal angles into the canal of Schlemm, then it results in the rise of intraocular pressure, which is called glaucoma. Now, what are the functions of aqueous humor? First of all, it supports the wall of the eyeball by exerting internal pressure. Second, it nourishes cornea and lens and removes waste of metabolism, as these two structures are devoid of vascular supply. Now comes the vitreous body. The vitreous body is basically a transparent gel which fills the eye behind the lens. As you have seen in the previous slide, there are some important structures inside the vitreous body. It is called hyaloid canal. Hyaloid canal is basically a channel which is passing through the vitreous body from the posterior aspect of lens till the optic disc, and it contains the hyaloid artery in fetus, but before birth this artery disappears. Now, what is the function of vitreous body? It basically contributes slightly to the magnifying power of the eye, and it supports the posterior part of the lens, and it assists in holding the neural part of the retina against its pigmented layer or outer part. Then we come to the lens. What is lens? It is a transparent biconvex structure enclosed in a transparent capsule placed between the vitreous body posteriorly and iris anteriorly. The structure of lens is that it contains of an elastic capsule, then cuboidal epithelium on the anterior surface, and lens fibers which form the main bulk of the lens. Now, related to the lens is an important mechanism. It's called accommodation of eye. Accommodation of eye is basically the mechanism by which eye accommodates from distant object to the near objects, right? And for this lens, it becomes more globular, and eyeballs converge to attain the maximum accommodation or maximum focusing on a close object. And with age or advancing age, there is a decrease in the elasticity of the lens capsule, and there is the lens fibers, these become dense. So because of these changes, aging changes or degenerative changes in the lens, there is difficulty in accommodation of eye. That is, a person cannot focus on the close objects, and this is called presbyopia. That can be corrected by putting the convex lenses in front of the eyes to correct that error of vision. Next, we come to the optic nerve, and in the learning objectives of this topic, we basically what we will study is the origin of the optic nerve, how is it formed, from which layer of retina, how it comes out or it leaves the eyeball, and how the optic chiasma is formed, the crossing of fibers in the optic chiasma, and then after the optic chiasma, optic tracts are formed, and what is the main visual pathway and some other main connections which are forming or responsible for the visual reflexes, right? So starting from the origin of the optic nerve, we know that retina, it has got inner nervous layer which is composed of the ganglionic layer, and the ganglionic layer of retina, it gives origin to the fibers of the optic nerve, right? And now in the next slides we will trace these whole visual pathway starting from the origin of optic nerve till its termination in the visual cortex. Now in this diagram you can easily trace the basic visual pathway, and it is basically showing you the visual pathway starting from the origin of the optic nerve till its termination in the visual cortex, right? This whole tract is called visual pathway. Now how the optic nerve is formed, as I've told you, that this is formed from the axons. These are basically the axons of the ganglionic layer of the retina, and these nerve fibers, these converge and they form the optic nerve and leave the eyeball from the optic disc to 2 to 3 millimeter towards the nasal side of the optic disc, and after leaving the eyeball these pass through the optic canal and enters the cranial cavity, and after leaving the eyeball the optic nerve of one side will unite with the optic nerve of the opposite side to form the optic chiasma. Now the exact location of optic chiasma is just at the junction of the anterior wall and the floor of the third ventricle. From there, optic chiasma, there will be within the optic chiasma there will be crossing of the fibers from both optic nerves. Basically these are the nasal fibers from both of the optic nerves which are crossed in the optic chiasma, and in the periphery of optic chiasma there are uncrossed fibers. So optic chiasma, it will give origin to the optic tracts which pass around the cerebral peduncles. In this diagram you can see the optic tracts which are formed from the optic chiasma. These are basically passing around the cerebral peduncles, which is a part of the, which is basically the midbrain portion. From there they will pass on to the lateral geniculate body, and in the lateral geniculate body these will synapse with the within this lateral geniculate body, and axons from the lateral geniculate body then originate in the form of optic radiation, and these optic radiation will then terminate into the primary visual areas in occipital lobes of the cerebral cortex, and it is present, this primary visual area, along with the secondary visual areas, area 70 which is a primary visual area and 18-19 which is a secondary visual area. These are present basically within the on the medial surface of each cerebral hemisphere in the occipital lobes, in the upper and lower lips of calcarine sulcus. So this is how the optic nerve is formed. It is originated from the eyeball, ganglionic layer of retina, forms the optic nerve, leave the eyeball, enter the cranial cavity through the optic canal, forms the optic chiasma, crossing of nasal fibers of each side of the optic nerve occurs in optic chiasma, and periphery contains the uncrossed fibers. Then optic tracts are formed from the optic chiasma. Optic tracts will synapse in the lateral geniculate body, the axons from the lateral geniculate body. These will form the optic radiation which will terminate in the visual cortex of the cerebral cortex, visual areas of the cerebral cortex. Now we come to the visual reflexes. As you know, the basic visual pathway, and what are visual reflexes? Basically there are some connections of some fibers of the visual pathway, basic visual pathway, to different areas of brain, and these connections are then responsible for the reflex activity in different structures of eye according to different visual stimuli, right? And these visual reflexes, important visual reflexes which you must know at this level, are the direct and consensual light reflexes, accommodation reflex, and corneal reflex. Now we will study these reflexes one by one. First of all, what is direct and consensual light reflex? As you can see in this diagram, this is showing you the visual pathway, and then there are additional connections of some of the fibers of this visual pathway to different structures in the brain. And regarding direct light and consensual light reflex, you must be knowing that whenever the light is thrown into one eye, the pupil of that eye into which the light is thrown and the pupil of the other eye in which the light is not thrown, both pupils will constrict. Now how does it happen? There is a pathway which is starting from the optic nerve and then optic chiasma and optic tracts. Now at this level where the optic tracts are formed, before these are reaching to the lateral geniculate body, some of the fibers of the optic tract on each side, these will pass on to the pretectal nucleus which is present in the midbrain portion, because as you know, optic tracts are passing around the cerebral peduncle, which is a midbrain area. So while passing around the cerebral peduncle, some of the fibers from the optic tract, each of the optic tract will pass on to the pretectal nucleus which are present near the superior colliculus in the midbrain area. So from there, these fibers will then go to the or synapse with the parasympathetic nucleus of the oculomotor nerve, which is also present in the midbrain, and this is called Edinger-Westphal nucleus. From each pretectal nucleus, the fibers will go to the Edinger-Westphal nucleus of each side, right? And as you can see in this diagram, this purple colored line, this is showing you some of the fibers coming from the optic tract and going to the pretectal nucleus. From the pretectal nucleus, fibers are going to Edinger-Westphal nucleus of each side. Now from there, after synapsing under Edinger-Westphal nucleus, these fibers will pass along the parasympathetic nerve fibers of the oculomotor nerve, and these will go on to the ciliary ganglion. In the ciliary ganglion, these will synapse and pass on to the sphincter pupillae of each side, right? Sphincter pupillae through the short ciliary nerve. Now as these fibers are sending their connections to each of the or Edinger-Westphal nucleus of both sides, that is why when the light is thrown into one eye, the pupil of the other eye will also constrict because of this connection at the Edinger-Westphal nucleus. So this is direct and consensual light reflex. Direct means the pupil of the eye which is exposed to the source of the light, it constricts, and consensual means the pupil of the other eye also constrict because of this connection at the level of the midbrain. So this is direct and consensual light reflex. Next comes the accommodation reflex. Now what is accommodation reflex? As I've told you in the previous slide while we were talking about the lens, then the mechanism of accommodation of eye. Accommodation is the mechanism, जिससे ये है कि when you are seeing at the distant objects and you want to see on some near object and you want to focus on that near object, right? So for that purpose, eyeballs, these will converge a little and there will be more focusing on that near object. Lens will become globular. Now how do these two mechanisms occur? There is a pathway for these activities or changes in the eye structures. First of all, this pathway starts from the optic nerve. As you can see this diagram, this is right eye, this is left eye, this is nose, right? So for accommodation, the tract, it starts from the optic nerve, passes through optic chiasma, optic tracts, then lateral geniculate body, passes on to through optic radiation to the visual cortex. Now when these optic radiations, these terminate in the visual cortex, some of the fibers, these have connection to the frontal eye field. These fibers which are connected with the frontal eye field from the visual cortex, these will descend then from the cortex and internal capsule, passing through the posterior-most part of the internal capsule, these will enter the midbrain portion. In the midbrain, these fibers, some of the fibers which are descending from the cortex, some of these fibers will synapse in the major motor nucleus of the oculomotor nerve and some with the Edinger-Westphal nucleus of the Edinger-Westphal nucleus of the third nerve, oculomotor nerve, right? So after synapsing, these both fibers will pass, those ending up or synapsing with the Edinger-Westphal nucleus, these will pass through the parasympathetic nerve fibers of the oculomotor nerve, pass on to the ciliary ganglion, and then through short ciliary nerve to the ciliary muscle, right? In the light reflex after synapsing the ciliary ganglion, the fibers from the Edinger-Westphal nucleus, these are passing to constrictor pupilla, because constrictor pupilla and ciliary muscle both are supplied by the autonomic nervous system, the parasympathetic postganglionic fibers through short ciliary nerve. In this case, in the accommodation reflex, the fibers which are coming from the cortex, these are synapsing in the motor nucleus and also in the Edinger-Westphal. Those from the Edinger-Westphal nucleus, these will pass on to the ciliary ganglion and then to the ciliary muscle. And the ciliary muscle, in response to these nerve impulses, will contract, will pull the ciliary body forward, will relax the tension in the suspensory ligament to which the lens is attached, and the lens will become globular. And along with that, the fibers which are synapsing in the motor nucleus of the oculomotor nerve, these fibers will pass on to the through the motor nucleus and motor fibers to the medial rectus muscle, and these medial rectus muscle, in response to these nerve impulses, will contract and cause the convergence of the eyeballs. This is how the accommodation is achieved. And this whole reflex or whole pathway is called the accommodation reflex. Now the corneal reflex is that whenever there is light touching of cornea or conjunctiva, there is blinking of eyelids, or in some cases there is tight closure of eyes. In this case, afferent impulses from corneal conjunctiva pass through the ophthalmic branch of trigeminal nerve. These will pass to the sensory nucleus of the trigeminal nerve, and from there internuncial neurons, these will connect with the motor nucleus of the facial nerve through medial longitudinal fasciculus. The motor nucleus of facial nerve, it passes from there, from the motor nucleus of the facial nerve, the impulses will pass on to the orbicularis oculi, which will contract, and there will be reflex contraction. Because of the reflex contraction of orbicularis oculi, there will be blinking of eyelids or closure of the eye. Now there are two important clinical conditions which are related with the optic nerve and visual pathways. The one is called papilledema and the other are visual field defects associated with the lesions in the optic pathways. First of all, what is papilledema? Basically, there are some anatomical features around the optic nerve, that is the meningeal sheaths, the dura mater, arachnoid mater, and pia mater. These are extended or around the optic nerve and sheathing the optic nerve till the level of the back of the eyeball, each eyeball, right? Where the dura mater, it blends with the sclera. Now, as these extensions are also carrying subarachnoid space along with them around the optic nerve, so whenever there are conditions in which the intracranial pressure is raised, these pressure changes are also transmitted around the optic nerve, and as this level of optic nerve, from where the optic nerve is leaving the eyeball, the area of optic disc, this is also the area of entry and exit of the central artery and vein of retina. So whenever there is increased intracranial pressure, and this is transmitted in the subarachnoid space of the meningeal extensions around the optic nerve, this will cause compression of the thin walls of the central vein of retina, which will eventually lead to the congestion in the central vein of retina, and this will cause edema and bulging of the optic disc. This bulging of optic disc will eventually or ultimately affect the optic nerve and visual impairment. This whole scenario is called papilledema, right? And second thing, which is visual field defects. For this, you must understand the basic visual pathway, and in this diagram, as you can see, in the visual pathway, it is shown that the in each side, in the right eye and in the left eye, both eyes, on each side, the temporal side of the retina, it perceives the images from the nasal side, or nasal field of vision is perceived by the temporal side of the retina and temporal field of vision by the nasal side. So these fibers are then forming the optic nerve, and in the optic chiasma, the nasal fibers, which are carrying the temporal vision, field of vision from each side, these are crossed and these are forming the optic tracts along with the nasal fibers or nasal field of vision carrying fibers of the same side. Now this is a basic concept, and whenever there is a lesion in the optic pathway at any level starting from behind the eyeball, which is labeled 1 here, and on the sides you can see these circles with different shaded areas showing the effect on the or loss of the visual field. Either this is the nasal visual field or temporal visual field. Okay, and these loss of field of visions are called heminopias. That means that either the nasal field of vision is lost or a temporal field of vision. Half field of vision is lost, either it is nasal or it is temporal. So starting from the level of lesion just behind the eyeball, which is labeled 1 here, if the periphery of the eyeball, as in the case of optic neuritis or in some cases of hysteria, if this peripheral field of vision is affected, peripheral area of the eyeball is affected, or neurons in this peripheral area, these are responsible for carrying the central field of vision. So there will be defect in the central field of vision causing the circumferential blindness. Now in this diagram, this basically they are showing you the lesions on the right side of the optic pathway at different levels on the right side of the optic pathway. That if the lesion is at different levels only at the right side of the optic pathway, how will it affect the both eyes, right? So if there is a lesion at the retrobulbar level, that is just behind the eyeball on the right side, then there will be circumferential blindness in the right side, right eye, right, or right field of vision. In the on the center field of vision of the right eye will be lost, but there will be no effect on the left eye because it is at this just behind the right eyeball. The lesion is at the right eyeball and not at the left eyeball, is not affected. The second lesion, which is labeled as number 2, it is at the level of optic nerve. If right optic nerve is completely dissected, then there will be complete blindness in the right eye, but no effect on the left eye, right? Then third level is at the periphery of the optic chiasma. If optic chiasma is affected, or lesion is at the level of the right side of the optic chiasma at the periphery, then what will it affect? It will affect only those fibers which are shown in blue dotted lines. These fibers are basically carrying the nasal field of vision of the same eye. So only in the third area, in the level 3, this is level 3, this circle which is showing defect in the nasal field of vision, this black shade is basically showing you the loss of that field of vision. So in the third level, the area lost or the field of vision lost is the nasal field of vision of the same side, which is shown by this blue dotted line, right? And the left eye, it will be not affected, right? At 3, this third number circle, this is white, means it is not affected, right? Left eye will not be affected because only this much area in the optic chiasma periphery is suffering from a lesion. Then comes the level 4. The lesion at the level 4 is at the center of the optic chiasma. Now this is the area where the crossing of the nasal fibers from each side, and nasal fibers of each eye are carrying the temporal field of vision of both eyes, right? As you can see in this diagram, this arrow is showing coming from the temporal side. These are carried by the fibers of the nasal side of each retina, right? So these nasal fibers are now crossing in the center of the optic chiasma. So when the lesion is at the center of the optic chiasma, on each side you will see at level 4 circle, there will be loss of temporal field of vision on both sides, in the right eye also and in the left eye also. So this is called bitemporal heminopia. Then comes the lesion at the level 5. The lesion at level 5 is at the level of optic tract. The lesions are shown on the right side only, right? So the level 5 lesion is at the level of right optic tract. If right optic tract is suffering from a lesion, in the right optic tract there will be the fibers which are carrying the temporal field of vision, right? And there are fibers which are carrying the nasal field of vision from the same side and temporal field of vision from the opposite eye. So the effect will be that there will be loss of nasal field of vision of the same eye, right? And there will be loss of temporal field of vision of the opposite eye. Then we will move on to the lesions in the other two areas. One is optic radiation and then in the visual cortex. Now, if the lesion is at the level of the optic radiation, right-sided optic radiation, the right optic radiation is also carrying the same fibers. The fibers of the nasal field of vision from the same eye and fibers from the for the temporal field of vision from the opposite eye. So if the lesion is at the right optic tract, the loss will be same as was in the case of the lesion of right optic tract. So one loss of nasal field of vision of the same eye and loss of temporal field of vision of the opposite eye. Then if the lesion is at the visual cortex, then there is same pattern, loss of nasal field of vision of the same eye and loss of temporal field of vision of the opposite eye. So this is how the lesion at the different levels of visual pathway will affect the loss of field of vision in different areas, and this can be tested by testing the field of vision of the patient in clinical setup. And these defects in the field of visions are called heminopias, right? Now this diagram is basically showing you the meningeal extensions around the optic nerve, and these meningeal extensions along with the subarachnoid space extending around the optic nerve till the level of the back of the eyeball where it blends with the sclera, and the dural sheath blends with the sclera, it ends up here. This extension of the dural sheath and subarachnoid space along with CSF around the optic nerve till the back of the eyeball is very important in the papilledema, because whenever there is raised intracranial pressure, this will be transmitted to this CSF around this optic nerve, right, in the subarachnoid space. So as you know that central artery and vein of retina, these have to enter the optic nerve at this area of optic disc, and for doing so these have to pierce these three sheaths, and when they are piercing these three sheaths to enter the optic nerve and then to enter or leave the eyeball through the optic disc, this is the place where the raised intracranial pressure will compress the walls of the thin walls of retinal vein, and this will cause the congestion of retinal vein and bulging of the optic disc, causing papilledema. So this was all about the eyeball and the optic nerve, and now we move on to the assignment. In this assignment, I have given you a question for tracing the visual pathways in the form, or sorry, visual reflexes in the form of a flow chart, right? And these are those same visual reflexes I've explained to you earlier: the direct and the consensual, light reflex, corneal reflex, and accommodation reflex. You will make a flow chart, and then you will show the entire pathway and the reflex pathway starting from the optic nerve and till its termination. The second part of this assignment is trace visual pathway from its origin till its termination in the visual cortex, right? First of all, you must be having a concept of the basic visual pathway and then the visual reflexes. So you have to attempt these two parts of the assignment, and you will make flow charts for this, and you will trace these pathways and reflex, you will show these reflex pathways in the form of a flow chart. And you will send this assignment at this email address, which is gulsanover15@gmail.com, as we have posted earlier also, that from now onwards each topic which is uploaded by the specific demonstrator will be sent to the email address of that demonstrator, right? So we are giving you the email addresses along with the assignments and the documents, and you will send that specific assignment to that specific email address, not in your mailbox of the second year MBBS NET में. मैंने ये पहले भी पोस्ट किया था, लेकिन उसके बावजूद कुछ रोल नंबर्स ने अपनी असाइनमेंट्स जो हैं उस स्पेसिफिक डेमोन्स्ट्रेटर की ईमेल एड्रेस में देने के बजाय they are sending those assignments into the mailbox of the second year MBBS anatomy. So I'm telling you that these are instructions of HOD, that these assignments will then not be considered, because segregation is very difficult, and that's why we are giving you the email addresses of each demonstrator, so that you will send these assignments into their specific email boxes, right? And the second thing is that second year, please write down your roll numbers and the name of the assignment in bold capital letters in the subject of the email. And क्योंकि अभी भी बहुत से रोल नंबर्स अपना ईमेल वैसे ही भेज देते हैं without writing anything, no roll number, no name of the assignment in the subject email, and we cannot sort out your assignments in this way. और अगर आप इस तरह की कोई assignment हमें receive होगी even in our own email box, आप बेशक अपने उस डेमोन्स्ट्रेटर के ही ईमेल बॉक्स में सेंड कर रहे हैं, ईमेल कर रहे हैं उसको असाइनमेंट, लेकिन आपने अपना सब्जेक्ट ऑफ ईमेल में अपना रोल नंबर और टॉपिक ऑफ असाइनमेंट बोल्ड कैपिटल लेटर्स में नहीं लिखा हुआ, तो दैट असाइनमेंट विल नॉट बी कंसिडर्ड. ओके, सो दिस वाज ऑल अबाउट दिस टॉपिक एंड द असाइनमेंट. होप यू अंडरस्टूड. थैंक यू वेरी मच.